Yashodhanandana Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Karantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. So this morning, as part of our Scientific Saturdays, we are studying a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, the Creative Impetus, and this is from Chapter 11. It's part of the discussion between Jad Bharat and Maharaj Rahugana. Ekadashashan Manaso Hi Vritaya Ekadashashan Manaso Hi Vritaya Akutaya Pancha Dio Abhimanam Akutaya Pancha Dio Abhimanam Matrani Karmani Puram Cha Tasam Matrani Karmani Puram Cha Tasam Vedanti Haikadasha Vira Bhumi Vedanti Haikadasha Vira Bhumi Ekadashasan Manaso Hivrittaya Akutaya Panchadiyo Bimana Matrani Karmani Purang Chatasang Vadanti Haikadasha Vira Bhumi Ekadashasan Manaso Hivrittaya Akutaya Panchadiyo Bimana Matrani Karmani Puram Chatasam Vadanti Haikadasha Vira Bhumi Ekadashasan Manaso Hivrittaya Akutaya Panchadiyo Bimana Matrani Karmani Purang Chatasang Vadanti Haikadasha Vira Bhumi Ekadashasan Manaso Hivrittaya Akutaya Panchadiyo Bimana Matrani Karmani Purang Chatasam Vadanti Haikadasha Vira Bhumi Ekadashasan Manaso Hivrittaya Akutaya panchatiyo bimana. Matrani karmani puram chatasam. Vadanti haikadasha virabhumi. Ekadashan manaso hivrittaya. Akutaya panchatiyo bimana. Matrani karmani puram chatasam. Vadanti haikadasha virabhumi. Ladies? Ekadashasan manaso hivrittaya. Akutaya panchatiyo bimana. Matrani karmani puram chatasam. Vadanti haikadasha virabhumi. Ekadashasan manaso hivrittaya. Akutaya panchatiyo bimana. Matrani karmani puram chatasam. Vadanti haikadasha virabhumi. Ekadasha. 11. Asan. There are. Manasa. Of the mind. He. Certainly. Vritaya. Activities. Akutaya. Senses of action. Pancha. 5. Dhiya. Senses for gathering knowledge. Abhimanaha. The false ego. Matrani. Different sense objects. Karmani. Different material activities. Parangcha. And the body, society, nation, family, or place of nativity. Nation, family, or place of nativity. Tasam. Of those functions. Vadanti. They say. Ha. Oh. Ekadasha. 11. Vira. O hero. Bhumi. Fields of activity. Translation. There are 5 working senses and 5 knowledge acquiring senses. There is also the false ego. In this way there are 11 items for the mind's functions. O hero, the objects of the senses, such as sound and touch, and the organic activities such as evacuation, and the different types of bodies, society, friendship, and personality, are considered by learned scholars the fields of activity for the functions of the mind. Please repeat. There are 5 working senses. And 5 knowledge acquiring senses. There is also the false ego. In this way there are 11 items for the mind's functions. O hero, the objects of the senses, such as sound and touch, the organic activities, such as evacuation, and the different types of bodies, society, friendship, and personality, are considered by learned scholars the fields of activity for the functions of the mind. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The mind is the controller of the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses and the 5 working senses. Each sense has its particular field of activity. In all cases, the mind is the controller or owner. By the false ego, one thinks oneself the body and thinks in terms of my body, my house, my family, my society, my nation, and so on. These false identifications are due to the expansions of the false ego. Thus, one thinks that he is this or that. Thus, the living entity becomes entangled in material existence. And I'm going to read the next verse as well, because the two are connected. Gandakriti sparsha rasa shravangsi visarga ratyarti abhijalpa shilpa ekadasham svikaranam ameti shayang aham dvadasham eka ahu. Sound, touch, form, taste and smell are the objects of the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. Speech, touch, movement, evacuation and sexual intercourse are the objects of the working senses. Besides this, there is another conception by which one thinks, this is my body, this is my society, this is my family, this is my nation, and so forth. This 11th function of the mind is called the false ego. According to some philosophers, this is the 12th function, and its field of activity is the body. Purport. This is very short. There are different objects for the 11 items. Through the nose we can smell, by the eyes we can see, by the ears we can hear, and in this way we gather knowledge. Similarly, there are the karmendriyas, the working senses, the hand, legs, genitals, rectum, mouth, and so forth. When the false ego expands, it makes one think, this is my body, family, society, country, etc. Ikadashasan manaso hivritaya akutaya panchadiyo bimana matrani karmani parungchata samvadanti haikadasha virabhumi. There are 5 working senses and 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. There is also the false ego. In this way, there are 11 items for the mind's functions. O hero, the objects of the senses such as sound and touch, the organic activities such as evacuation, and the different types of bodies, society, friendship and personality are considered by learned scholars the field of activity for the functions of the mind. Om Ajnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshuran Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. We continue Scientific Saturdays, and it may seem that we are labouring on this point of the elements, the senses, and the mind. But these aspects of our Sankhya philosophy are absolutely crucial to understanding how the material world works. Because the way the material world works is simply to engage and condition the jiva. That's what it's for. And therefore the best way of analysing what this material world is, what it is composed of, how it works, how it functions, what it's meant to do, how you're meant to engage with it, is to understand how it entangles us, how it captures our consciousness and engages us in the activities of the mind and the senses. And it's also very useful, as I mentioned, I think, last time round, that when we understand how the material energy works in this way, we also begin to understand how first of all, we understand how conditioned characters, like myself, become entangled in this material world. But it also indicates to us how advanced personalities that are described in the Bhagavatam can actually carry out the activities that we read about them, not as mythology, not as fantasy, not as even exaggeration, but as the actual way in which you can manipulate the material energy to generate anything, to create anything, to move anything that you want to do. And by understanding these processes, we get out of what we called naive realism. We are realists amongst the transcendentalists. Most transcendentalists, the impersonalists, can't believe that the world is not there. It's just a figment of our imagination. We understand that we only comprehend the world within the experiences of our mind. We agree on that point, that our only connection with this world is what we experience within the mind. But that does not mean that the world is not real. It is there. But we're learning to understand what the reality of the world is in a different way. Different to how we have been conditioned through its normal life. And we can blame modern science for its analysis, but modern science is just another product of conditioned thinking. And it's always been there in human society. There's always been conditioned thinking. And modern science has just codified that and made it sound really respectable. But what we are trying to do is understand the way the material energy works in a different way. And what we try to explain so far is that we can think of everything that composes this world in terms of energy and information. That is how the Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita describe what the material world is all about, this Bahiranga Shakti. It is substance, which is really just energy, and that substance, that energy, is molded by the information that specifies what it does and what it looks like. It's Vritta, which is functions, and it's Lakshana, its qualities, characteristics. So that those are defined by the information provided very nicely by the three gunas. So our analysis in Sankhya is that all physical stuff is analyzed as sensory properties that relate to perception by consciousness. And therefore they are fundamental. These, what I mentioned in the next verse, as the 5 objects of the perception senses, which are, as you remember, sound. No. These are the subtle sense objects, the tanmatras. What are they? Sound, touch, sight, smell, and taste. Not necessarily in that order, but those are the 5. And they are fundamental. They are elementary. Why? Because they're each absolutely distinct. And this is a problem for modern neuroscience. They can't break the experiences of these things down to mix them up. That we know that, and we've talked about light entering the eye, but ultimately that's turned into electricity, which goes to one part of the brain. Bzzz, little thing lights up. But why does that little flash of electricity look like something to us? It actually looks like a picture. That is the difficulty. And our experience of the picture, that is what we call qualia. It has properties of color and form and things that we are seeing as a picture. But there's no picture in the brain. There is only electricity. So where is that picture? It is fundamentally different to everything that exists within physics. It is, therefore, that qualitative experience that we are undergoing of sights and forms is fundamental, elementary. Nothing else can produce it. Therefore, the Bhagavatam says it's an element. It's elementary. And then when other stuff vibrates in our ear, and then that sets up an electric signal which goes zip to these parts, and we go flash, And now we're hearing something. Fundamentally, hearing is totally different to what you're seeing. Isn't it? It's a completely different experience. Therefore, it's elementary. We don't know, and we can't explain it in physics, we cannot explain it in biology, we cannot explain the experience of it in neuroscience. It's an element. Similarly, pop something in your mouth, and it sets up a chemical thing. Another little bit of electricity goes to another part of the brain. That tastes nice. A completely different type of experience. Fundamentally different. Elementary. Smell something. Same thing. Message goes to the brain, bit of electricity. But that smells different. Touch, another signal. Zip, and it feels like something. These are elementary experiences. That's why the Bhagavatam lists them like that. They cannot be analysed in terms of the world. So you can do all the physics, all the biology, if you like, all the chemistry, and you still don't discover these elements. Never mind consciousness, you're not even discovering the elements that you are experiencing of the world. Inexplicable. So there's no explanation for our qualitative experiences. This wonderful word, qualia. The qualities of our experience. Now there's a thing called synesthesia. Have you heard of synesthesia? It's an effect that is probably mostly, you're aware of it through various intoxication, where your eye may pick up some information and you, instead of seeing it as an image, you experience it as a sound. Or a sound comes to you and you experience it as some lights or colour or something like that. So it's a mixing up of the senses, but they're still individual. And it actually demonstrates that something more than just the brain is at work in generating these things. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about a bit more. It said that actually everyone has got some kind of synesthesia, some little mixing of the senses. Mine is numbers. I see numbers spatially. I can count 1 to 100 and it goes in a particular line in space. That's a synesthesic effect. So you can all later on meditate on what's your synesthesia. But what we are presenting here is that ultimately, as the Bhagavatam says, the sense objects for the perception senses and the sense objects for the working senses, which are those various activities, which are mentioned in that next verse. And speech, touch, movement, evacuation, and sexual intercourse are the objects of the working senses. That's what they engage in. That's what they connect with. And those are fundamentally elementary activities that are provided for embodied living beings. So at the center of all of this, this is the point that is made, is the mind. The mind is coordinating all these activities of the senses. But it's not just gathering all these senses willy-nilly, with no purpose or agenda. It has an agenda. And that agenda is explained as the 11th item, which is, what was the 11th item in the verse? The false ego. And the word used here is abhimana. Those who know Hindi will know abhiman is often pride. But here it's the root of it. It's the false ego, it's the false identification. And it Prabhupada spells it out in the purport, you know. thinking that I am this or that, my body, my house, my family, my society, my nation, and so on. All these concepts. So we'll come to that. So the mind is that which connects the senses with the purpose of the false ego. And that's important, because we're going to come and explain how it is that I am under the conception of my false ego, of my ahankara. So, just to be clear, that there is no way of understanding this world and how we come to perceive it without postulating the role of manasa, the mind, and its vritti, its functions, gathering these tanmatras particularly. Now, the tanmatras, I've heard some devotees say the tanmatras are qualia. We shouldn't say it just like that, because qualia has a certain meaning in the discussions of philosophy of mind in academic circles. It means the qualities of our inner experience. What is true is that the way to account for those inner experiences of qualia is by understanding the tanmatras. But qualia for the materialist really only exist within the mind. Whereas tanmatras are elements which exist within all the features of the world around us. They are out there. They are manifest when they are inherent within the Mahabhutas. Then their qualities, these tanmatra qualities, are available for our senses. And when our senses go out to gather that information, they bring it back into the mind. So it is the mind that is actually perceiving the world. So what does the brain do? What does the brain do then? It's obviously quite important. We protect our brain. Brain injury is terrible. Diseases of the brain, horrible. They really affect how we experience the world. But they're not responsible for the fact that we do experience the world. The brain isn't responsible for that. And actually, the brain hasn't got enough information to give you an experience of the world. Have I talked about visual sparseness? I don't think so. I don't think I've mentioned it. This is a known factor, not much mentioned in the neuroscience when they're talking popular, because it's a problem. There are several big problems I'm going to mention. One of them is sparseness. The situation is that at this minute, billions of light rays and photons are entering your eyes, billions of them, at every moment, billions of them, hitting your retina, which is the inside of the eye, which is covered with all the photosensitive cells. But only a small portion of those photons actually activate cells for one reason or another, because the cells need to rest between firing, they're not covering everything, So out of billions of photons, only millions of cells are activated. That's still a lot. Millions of cells. So they reckon that for every moment, there's about 10 million bits of information ready, gathered in the eye, ready to go down the optic nerve to the brain. But the problem is, from that point on, there is incredible information lost. Just within the problems of sending an electrical message down a biological nerve, a ganglion. So by the time that 10 million gets to the back of the brain, they reckon it's down to 10,000. So only 10,000 bits of information out of the billions of bits of information that arrived in your eye has now got to the brain, 10,000. And they reckon out of that, probably only a few hundred are used in what they look at as, oh, that's the brain trying to make sense of what it is. So that means you've only got a few hundred bits of information. Now, I can never remember the calculation of bits to bytes and things like that. And what that, and pixels is 256 bytes, isn't it? One pixel? 256 bytes, I think that's right. Huh? 888, isn't it? Yeah, somehow it gets to 256. So it works out that your brain has the ability to generate a 20 pixel picture. Now, if you got your new iPhone, smartphone, and yeah, brand new camera, it's got 20 pixels. Couldn't read anything. But that's all your brain's got. That's sparseness. It hasn't got the information to generate the quality of picture that you see. So how is it that I am seeing things with such incredible detail and beauty? When the brain doesn't have that information, there is some image enhancing process that is happening. And people try and find that in the brain, but still there isn't the information to make it up. And that is why Anil Seth, he's the top neuroscientist in the UK, says, some people just say that therefore everything is an illusion. That the brain is making this up. It hasn't got the information to decide what exactly is out there, so it kind of makes it up. And there's two more problems. One is connecting the experiences. Oh, Hare Krishna Jai Jagannath Subhadra tying the different types of qualia together. Because these are happening in different parts of the brain and no one knows how they join together. And here's a problem. When I clapped like this, you saw it and heard it at exactly the same time, didn't you? Now, we know sound moves slower in the air, and therefore there's a slight time lag, but in this sort of distance, it's imperceptible. Identical, same time. But the problem is that these two inputs, a sound wave going into the ear and light entering the eye, are processed by the brain at different rates. Which will be processed quicker? No. No, because it's electricity. And it's actually there's more data going in with, it's a bigger file. It's like a video file. Which can a computer deal with quicker, a video file or an audio file? An audio file is smaller, So your brain can process the sound from that clap a half second before the brain has processed the visual information. That just changes everything about what you think the brain can do. If it takes it half a second longer, why is it that my experience of it is at that moment, together? Because my brain, you've got to think about it. There used to be a cartoon script called in one of these kids' magazines when I was a kid, called The Numbskulls. And it kind of showed you all these kind of boffins working in the head, trying to sort out different issues. So you can imagine, the guys in the ear department, get the file in, there's something's come through, we think it's a sudden sound, sounds like a clap, yep, let's process it, got it, it's a clap, we've got that sound. Now, let's pass it to consciousness. Oh, but what about the eye guys? Have they got their bit together yet? Well, we call them up. And the eye guys, yeah, we're working on it. Just it's still buffering here. Be with you in about half a second. Half a second? That's ridiculous. That's a long time. In consciousness terms, half a second's a long time. Doesn't sound long. But it's more than a blink. It's more than an amnesia, you know. So, you know, the ears are going to think, well, what do we do then? Do we send the sound to consciousness and you'll just tell them the picture is coming later? Or do we hold back the sound and wait till you've done your bit and then we can put them together? What do we do? That's the quandary that neuroscience faces. And it's a real one. You know, it sounds like I'm making a joke of it. But this is a real problem. Therefore, Anil Seth says, it's not just that the brain is kind of trying to interpret the world. He says, it's basically that you are living in an hallucination, just slightly moderated by sensory activity. That basically your brain's only got sort of vague information about the world, and the brain is then creating this image I have of a room full of everyone, you know, who I can recognize. It's making all that up. We're living in this hallucination, just moderated a little bit by our senses. Yes, there's a world out there and the senses are getting information, but basically you've made a complete hallucination of it. That's the result they come to by trying to analyze this. Because they don't understand the function of manasa. Manasa is that aspect that can reach into the world, gather the 10 matras, and create that richness of experience, of qualities of sound, the qualia of sound, the qualities of imagery, the qualia of taste and touch and everything, and give us that experience. So, yes, the mind pays attention to what the senses are doing and how, you know, if I'm looking here, that's the imagery I'm getting, not that image, because my senses. So I am getting an experience based on what my senses are doing. But the senses themselves, the biological senses, aren't capable on their own of giving me that experience. It needs the help of the mind. The mind has to gather the information in order to give you the experience you're having. That's why it says this is the field of activities for the functions of the mind, gathering this stuff. So, if this is true, then, this is how science works, if you've got a theory that explains experience of qualia, that overcomes the problems of sparseness, overcomes the problem of binding different sensory experiences into one, that gets over the problem of time lag. If you've got a theory that deals with that, then that's very good. Bhagavatam has. The scientists will then say, well, can we make some predictions out of this? If you're saying that the mind is able to gather additional information which enhances what the senses have collected and produces the richness of your experience, therefore you should be able to postulate that the mind can access information without the senses. Can you show that? That the mind can access information about the world without the use of the senses.
Imagination.
In one sense, imagination is a good example. But then they'll say, well, that's just the brain trying to recreate based on memories and things like that. No, let's do it. Let's do new information. Have I talked about remote viewing here? I've not mentioned it, haven't I? I've given a whole thing on it. Worth mentioning again, at least in this context, because this is important. The system of remote viewing, particularly as it's been explored in several universities. Specifically, there was a system devised by Stanford Research Institute in the 70s, and then in the 80s and 90s, Princeton also did another version of remote viewing, which remote viewing is accessing information by the mind which is distant in time and space, i.e. you can't get it via your senses. Not information that you've known, not information that your senses could reach. And it's a very simple process. I'm not going to get into the details because that's not important now. We should set up an experiment on it or a retreat on it one time, and you know, it can be a lot of fun to do the actual thing, because anyone can do it. In fact, everyone does it. This is how you are experiencing the world. The mind is gathering information for you. And in the process of remote viewing, and I'm speaking from a lot of experience on this, you experience all the 10 matras. That's the amazing thing. You do not know, you can be given, your mind can be directed by another person to a particular site, target, event, whatever it is. You don't know anything about it. You've just been sent somewhere. And you will start gathering the 10 matras there. And usually the first thing you kind of is a feeling about the place, a sense of its purpose, of significance, its energy. Then you kind of can get words that describe it in different ways. So your first and those words are kind of qualitative words connected with qualia. But then the qualia start to come. First imagery. Then you might hear sounds. You might think, I'm hearing a bell. I'm smelling incense. There's food here. There's activities. There's, the 10 matras start to flow into you, and you start to get develop a complete picture and a complete experience of it, of that particular target. It's quite an amazing process, and it demonstrates that it is the mind that is actually doing the gathering of the richness of the 10 matras and producing the experience, but it's doing it in a way that convinces you that it is your senses, that it is your body, what you're looking at, what you're putting your ear to, what you're attending to in that way. The mind does it in such a way that it preserves, not just preserves, it reinforces the concept that you are this body. Even though when you analyze the process, you realize, I cannot be this body. The senses aren't capable of this. It needs a non-neural mind. And that I am different from that non-neural mind. I am not the mind. I am what experiences the stuff in the mind. We were listening to a discussion with Sam Harris. He's a kind of philosopher, sort of spiritual, always impersonal. But he was chatting with our friend Ganashampriya Jai Sethi in his one of his podcasts. And Sam Harris makes the point, we know we're different from the mind because thoughts come to the mind, and the only time you know when the thought has come to the mind is when you've heard it. You've got to think the thought. Before you can think about the fact that you've heard the thought has to come to you, right? So that was a starting bit on meditation, to try and understand we as the observer are different from the mind. So that is the key thing, that the mind is gathering information, and it's taking the information of the world in the form of 10 matras. It is using those 10 matras within itself then to generate a format of information that is suitable for consciousness to experience. So the mind gathers data from the world, processes that into a format, and then presents it to us. And another way of understanding ourselves different from what the mind is and what the body and brain are is that we're only conscious of a very small bit of what our senses are picking up at any one moment. Isn't it? Very small bit. You know? We can't hear two things at once. I'm not going to do it here, but in certain workshops, I play a little sound recording of a particular set. It's supposed to be music, but it's actually just different kind of sounds produced electronically. And I ask people, how many of those sounds did you hear at the same time? And the answer is always one. At least the correct answer is one. Because as soon as you think you're hearing my voice, another sound comes, your ear and your consciousness goes to that. That's what you heard. You know? Now you've jumped again. You know? Mind, boom, 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 boom. That's the accepting, rejecting thing. That's one aspect of it. That it is jumping from one thing to another. Saying, okay, now we're going here, now we're going, yes, let's try this. And our consciousness is very, very limited. We're only able to focus on one little thing at a time, practically speaking. So this gets into the concept of the Cartesian theatre that philosophers have kind of come, you know, they've kind of realized, really, we're like someone in the audience watching a theatrical presentation. And when the spotlight shines on this or that, that's what we attend to. That's what we experience. When the spotlight changes, our attention moves. So we're experiencing like that. Now, neuroscientists don't like this idea of a Cartesian theatre because it very clearly establishes the idea of a subjective, conscious entity experiencing something which is not it. And that does not fit within the physicalist kind of concept. But the physicalist concept is so pathetic and weak that it needs a complete overhaul, thanks to the Bhagavatam. So the Cartesian theatre works very well. And it's actually part of our understanding. And this is where we kind of link into the 11th item, the false ego. That Prabhupada gives the example. You know, why is it that we are the jiva, which is transcendental, completely untouched, unsullied by the material energy? How is it trapped and conditioned in the material world? And Prabhupada gives the example of cinematography. It's the original old word for, you know, video, movies, whatever, you know, films. This, you know, the experience of the cinema, you know, that you're watching this thing. And that was Prabhupada's update on the Cartesian theatre. Now, in a lot of our discussions, we're trying to update it into a virtual reality experience, which we should explore, which actually is even better. Because the whole point of the jiva and our experience of the world is we're experiencing it through identification. And we often talk about that, don't we? That the pains and pleasures of this world are to do with identification. I'm driving in my car, someone hits it, I feel pain, I feel that hurt. Now, it didn't hurt me, it hurt the car. But I'm identifying with that. You know, I own this thing, I've spent so much money looking after it, you know, and someone has gone and messed it up, you know. Now what are people going to think? I'm driving around with a smashed up car, you know, what are they going to think of me, you know? I am investing myself in the car as part of my identity, as part of who I am, how I'm presenting myself to the world. And that has been dented. So I feel the pain. So in the same way, the jiva identifies with the situation of the body and undergoes real pain. Actually, we are feeling pain. The basis for feeling that is false. But the feeling is real. Now, going back to the theatre aspect, in one sense we can describe it in terms of a theatrical or cinema experience. And we often give the example that, you know, there's a group of people, you know, sitting in the audience watching this film, one of these horror films, you know, and, you know, it's getting creepy and the music is getting, you know, someone's climbing up the stairs with the axe and, you know, they're coming in, you know, the guys are hiding in a little space and then they're found, you know, and, you know, the audience jumps, right? As if something has happened to them. Nothing has happened to them. They're sitting there with the popcorn and they're, you know. Oh, I spilled it. But that's the worst thing that could happen. They spilled their popcorn. But they're going through the emotions of it. You know, the hero dies. Oh, no, it's so sad. You know, they were allowing ourselves to be conditioned by what we're watching, what we're experiencing out there. It's silly, but we do it. And the ultimate one we're doing that is within this body. Allowing and what we're experiencing from the mind, whatever the mind feeds us, we kind of think, oh, that's happy, oh, that's sad, you know, whatever. And it's not just that we want to watch a drama of the world. Actually, we want to be in that drama. We want to be the center of that drama. The lead character in the drama that is going on around me. Yes, I am the center of my own little world, and whatever is happening, you know, that I am the key person. I am the hero of this enterprise. You know, that's who we want to be. We want to be in the drama. And in order to be in the drama, we have to take a character. And that character that we take to be in the drama, experiencing what material life is, that character is the Abhimaha, the false ego persona. Persona is a nice word, I think, because it indicates that you have accepted an image or an idea of yourself that's not really you, but it's something that you've taken on in order to present yourself to the world. And so we take on the persona of this body, you know, and with all the connections of family and friendship, personality included, you know.